Great news. Dirty Keto is now on Amazon. If you're living in the U.S., go straight to Amazon and get Dirty Keto. Watch it, rate it, and review it. If you're outside of the U.S., meaning Western Europe or Canada or Mexico, it's not there yet. Don't ask me why. Listen, those people made me put a PG-13 rating on it when there was nothing in it that would have caused that. But let's get ahead of this thing. Let's watch it, rate it, and review it. Go get Dirty Keto right now, and on with the show.
Thanks for listening to Vinnie Tortorich on NSNG Lifestyle Audio. Welcome to Fitness Confidential One-on-One. Vinnie Tortorich, founder of NSNG, goes long form with top luminaries in the field of health and fitness.
Yeah, I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry, I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed.
Ow, she's a brick house. She's mighty, just letting it all hang out. Ow, she's a brick house. I like lady stack, that's a fact. Ain't holding nothing back. Ow, she's a brick house.
Yeah, everything reminds me of a song. And I was just talking to this woman off the air, and we were talking about an injury she had just last week, happened in the gym. And that song came to mind because when you think of Mimi's life, we're talking to Mimi Morgan again here today. When you think about her life, she really is pretty damn sturdy. And, in a weird way, and we're going to talk to her about this, but in a weird way, kind of left for dead. Yeah, the medical community didn't really know what to do with her, so they just went, all right, you're a statistic. We see who you are, and we're good. You're going to die, and it's going to be an awful death. And by the way, do I think it's sinister? No. There's just, when you talk about medicine, the part that we don't realize. Well, here, let me bring her in really fast. Mimi, you there?
I'm here.
There she is, folks. That's right, Mimi Morgan, back for another shot. So, Mimi, agree or deny, but I understand the medical community, right? And I don't think they're out to get anyone. I think they really want to help everyone. I really do. I think in a lot of cases, they're hamstrung by insurance. And that's a problem. A lot of doctors can't do what doctors tell me all the time. They complain. We are not allowed to really practice anymore because we aren't allowed to be doctors. We have insurance companies telling us what to do. We have the hospitals we work in telling us to kick a sick person out of a bed because they got to keep turning these beds. Kind of like a restaurant has to keep turning tables, right?
Exactly.
So I think doctors really go into medicine to help people, but then they get caught in this weird kind of black hole that they can never really pull themselves out of, right? They get stuck in this, and then that's how they make a living, so they have to dance with the date they brung, right? So Mimi, am I wrong in thinking that the hospitals, in your case, they were like, okay, she's a statistic. She's got A, B, C, and D. All-cause mortality is not on her side. We're just going to try to make her as comfortable as we can, and she needs to make peace with the fact that she won't be around much longer. Am I putting any words in your mouth?
No, not at all. That is it. Yeah, there was no hope, no suggestion that anything can turn around. It was like, this is a hand you were dealt. Deal with it.
Okay, so there's a lot of audience that know who you are, but there's also a lot of the audience here who have no idea who you are. So explain what your age and what happened to you, and give us a little backstory, if you will.
Okay. So I'm going to actually be 70 in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. I know. It's a big birthday because it's a real marker. When you're 60, it feels like, oh, you've got tons of time ahead of you. And you're, way far from the aging period, and hitting 70, it's like, oh, wow. So it really is it's a big time period, but in 3 weeks, I'll be 70. And I got sick about 10, 12 years ago. It started with a series of falls, a series of fractures. And the first inkling that my body was attacking itself was when I got Dupuytren's right after my second surgery for my wrist. And previously, just to back up real quick for those that don't know my story, I grew up in the Northeast and grew up pretty much farm to table, head to tail. So I grew up with all the meat. We had the tongue at the table. My mother would make, meals with oxtails. So I grew up knowing good food. We did not have processed food in our household. And so that was a great foundation. But along with everybody else, when I was 20 and all the, low fat craze came out and wanting to be lean and trim and all that, I followed suit and gave up what, I grew up with. And I was slender, and active when I grew up. So
Mimi, when you decided to change over to eating all the high carb, low calorie stuff, what year are we talking about? And just do the math. How old were you?
I say, like mid 70s or so, I guess, when the low fat came out, some point about that time. I was born in 54. We had a lot of fat at the table, regular butter. I don't ever actually remember any kind of seed oils in my house. I mean, I really grew up with good food. I really knew what good food was. I remember the fish man coming, getting the dairy from local. My father, getting deer, getting good meat from the butcher. We'd have the whole beef, the whole hog. The root cellar with the hams hanging. I mean, that's how much we had it, and the bacon.
Wow, you guys,
I remember
really
going down before school, getting a slab of bacon from the cellar and bringing it up for my mom to cook it for breakfast. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom and cooked, and we had farm eggs and all of that. But when that craze came out, I just started to follow suit, and started to eliminate more of the fats from the diet. Probably about 10, 15 years later, I started to do more plant-based than full-on vegan for a good 6+ years.
So what year do you figure that started? Mid-'80s?
So I'm going to say in the 80s, definitely, like mid-'80s.
Yeah, I remember that was the first time, I was at Tulane. So you're with a bunch of people who are not from Louisiana. And it was the first time I think I actually heard the term vegan. I'd heard the word vegetarian before. Right. Because sometimes people, I'm a vegetarian, which means they still ate fish and eggs and, they were pescatarians really. And they ate cheese and everything else. And then someone said, yeah, I'm a vegan. I think I was in college. And I said, oh, yeah. That's like a vegetarian. She said, oh, vegetarians, give me a break. I'm a vegan. I was like, well, how's that different? It's like, well, we don't eat anything from an animal.
Right.
And I said, well, how do you get milk? And they were like, we don't drink milk. And I was like, so cheese, butter? And they were like, no, that stuff will kill you. And I was like, wait a minute. So you don't eat meat, but you have fish, right? You have something, right? Like I was trying to wrap my mind around how crazy this. You see, today people hear vegan and they go, "Oh, you're a vegan."
Right.
But go back to it could have been 82 or 83. Someone said vegan, and I was like, "Okay, explain this to me again. How are you getting protein?"
Yeah. Well, I wasn't.
Right.
I wasn't getting protein. I wasn't getting fat. I was getting a lot of carbs and a lot of beans and, a lot of seaweed and, maybe some tofu. And, I wasn't getting any fat, and I wasn't getting really any protein. Because I don't think you can get the protein that you need from that.
Right.
I've yet to hear, somebody who eats like I do now going back the other way, where there's tons of stories of people who, started out vegetarian and vegan, and now they're, keto and carnivore. But I did that for a number of years, was active. And it wasn't until late 90s that I changed. I went from a stay-at-home mom working, so now I'm like burning the midnight oil, working myself into the ground. I was self-employed. I was a dinnerware designer. And then started giving up training, lifting weights, being active. And before, I'd bike 125 miles a week. Now I'm not biking. I'm letting that go because I'm choosing to work. And then I hit menopause, and it just all took its toll on me. Then I'm not sleeping. And it doesn't take long when you get to that point at that age where, it really does start to catch up on you when you're nutrient deficient. So I started breaking my bones, had surgery, and then that's after my second surgery, developed Dupuytren's.
So go back, Mimi. You broke some bones. I mean,
yeah.
Listen, you didn't play in the NFL. How did you break bones? And which bones did you break?
I fell down and broke my wrist. Had to have, a plate and screws, and then a year later had to have soft tissue. They were the most inconsequential falls ever. And every time I trip, just about, I'd hit the ground and I'd, have an ankle fracture, getting up out of the chair and tripping on my own 2 feet, walking across the room. Another step with a dog, my left wrist, there's nothing major.
So basically, your bones were like stem wear, right?
Yeah,
just one
exactly.
fall, something that wouldn't break any other glass, and you're cracking it. So, you remind me, and I want to know if, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Ann Childers. I need to get her back on the show. Do you know Ann Childers?
No, I don't.
She was a doctor who decided to go vegan way back when like that. I think Ann is younger than you. She's probably a little closer to my age, but right in the middle maybe. And she got to where not only did all of her, from veganism, just being a strict vegan and not getting, and folks, we're not bagging on vegans here. This is about optimal health, and when things started happening to her, instead of her going, maybe I should have a piece of meat, she doubled down on veganism. She went she just ate more grains and more junk and more. And she wasn't just having, her hair, she was losing hair. She was having trouble with her teeth, which a lot of them do because all the bone in your jaw starts loosening up and everything, and everything, teeth falling out.
Right.
This is a medical doctor. And then the worst thing happened to her. And I want to ask you if any of this to any level happened to you. She was becoming so forgetful that she didn't know which cabinet held her plates or her coffee mugs or her drinking glasses. So she started putting labels. She brought a label machine home to label where her different, where her flatware was and everything else. Because she would walk into her kitchen as if she had never been in there before.
Yeah. Mm.
And this is a woman who was giving medical advice during the day. And then she hired an assistant because she didn't want to lose her license. She hired a personal assistant to literally take care of her. So all she had to do was try to work with her patients at work. And then one day she decided to have a piece of meat, completely changed her life. Did you have any of that?
I did have severe cognitive issues. It wasn't for a few years later when my third ailment showed up, and they doubled down on, because of the medication I was taking, I doubled down on being really plant-based with maybe 4 to 6 ounces of protein. And yes, I did. I had severe cognitive issues.
What do you remember at that time? Did you just mark it up to age and maybe, I've been through, the change and all this kind of stuff? Yeah. Was it
for me at this point, so after I had the Dupuytren's, I was diagnosed shortly after with rheumatoid arthritis. And then 2 years after that, Parkinson's. And the Parkinson's medication competes with protein. So I was instructed not to save my protein for a night and have a small amount. And the medicine made me very nauseous. So in the day, I'm still working. And in the day, my diet really is bananas, graham crackers, and saltines, just to be able to stomach the medication that I'm taking every 3.5 hours with maybe 4 ounces of a little chicken or a little fish at nighttime. And yes, cognitive issues were happening. Really bad. To the point where I ended up having to quit work because I couldn't function.
Can any actual examples of not like Anne was putting labels where her plates were? Anything like that where you couldn't?
So well, sometimes I'd walk down the street and I wouldn't know where I was. I'm a math minor. Majored in biology, math minor. I can hold an enormous amount of numbers, things in my head. I couldn't do simple division or subtraction. I'm an accomplished cook, and all of a sudden I can't put together a meal, even with the recipes that I have out. So I had to give up doing my Thanksgiving dinner. My girls took over. I just couldn't my executive function. Just like went out the window, and. It's really debilitating because your world gets smaller and it just chips at you. You really, I was quite aware that I was losing the ability to function and do things. I had to have, an app to program my medication. I'd have to have charts because I couldn't trust that I would do all of that. I did get tested and though there was definitely slowing, I wasn't technically cognitively impaired, but I was right at the edge. And if I had continued on that path, I would have already, it would have happened pretty quick.
One of the things I hear a lot with, I do consults with people every day, 5 days a week, not every day. And they'll tell me, even if they weren't vegans, but they were just eating a crappy high carb diet and mostly, just processed foods. Right. Everything from chips and dips and all the processed junk. I hear all the time, one person put it better than anyone else. And he said, it seemed like when I started eating correctly within about 10 days, it was like someone washed the windshield of my car really clean. Yeah. And all of a sudden I can see again. I've had people tell me, I would be driving home from work, a route I take every day, twice a day. Right. And I would look up and not really know where I was or where to turn to get home or what, and just getting frightened in their car.
Oh, yeah.
At a stoplight going, I don't know where I am. And if that's not scary enough to start eating real food again, now we're not just talking about vegan anymore. I think this happens with processed foods too. People have told me they've gotten off of diet soft drinks, erythritol, stevia, all the fake sugars.
Yes.
The first thing they'll tell me is, all of a sudden, I'm doing math in my head again, where I used to have to take out my phone and try to figure out simple things that I start remembering things I couldn't remember before. I'm not lost when I'm driving home at night. Can you imagine going through life feeling like you got to work and now you're driving home going, wait, nothing looks familiar? That's pretty scary.
I've been there.
Yeah.
I gave up driving anywhere really outside of a 5-mile radius. When 10, 20 years before, I went to Europe and drove by myself with a road map before cell phones.
Yeah.
And drove myself for a couple of weeks. And now all of a sudden, I'm not leaving my town. I'm not, and I gave up driving at night. And yes, I was there.
Yeah.
But I hadn't connected it with food. I really thought because I had these illnesses that's what was causing everything.
And look, it could have been a combination thereof, but I'm talking to people who don't have Dupuytren's, which wouldn't give you cognitive dysfunction, but you do have Parkinson's, which can affect you cognitively. And that's what we're going to talk about. I want to start with Dupuytren's because I have Dupuytren's. So let's explain to the audience what Dupuytren's, because it sounds like a funny name. It can't be too difficult because it sounds funny. Go on.
I know, it does sound funny, and it's actually not really common, but it's surprised how many people, when I share this part of the story, how many messages I get from people. It typically affects males. It's Dupuytren's if it affects your hands. It also can affect the bottoms of your feet. Your body overproduces collagen, which is what my body did while I was healing from the second surgery. You produce collagen, and my body just wouldn't stop producing it. And you get nodules on your tendons, and your hand eventually claws up. And your tendons here in your hand, it can go in your wrist and in your thumb. My thumb is a little bit crooked and out of joint. I had it pretty bad around here. And I went to the doctor with it, and they said, I said, you got to stop this. I'm an artist, and I'm right-handed. And they said, well, we have to wait until you lose the use of your hand, and then we'll go in and cut the nodules off of the tendons. By the way, it's going to come back again. And we'll do it again, and eventually you'll just lose the hand. What happens is the tendons drop and your hand claws up.
Well, let me show the audience. If anyone's watching on video, maybe you can see it in my hand right there in the middle.
Right on yours, yeah.
Yeah, and I have it on both hands. And also this hand, the little finger, it doesn't operate correctly. But I've broken my hand so many times in football. I was a rock climber for a lot of years, through probably from 1990 through like 2000. I climbed rock a lot. Wow. I was I don't know if you're a rock climber, I was a 512 plus lead climber, which means I was up there, right? The kind of stuff you would see in Cliffhanger, right?
Yeah. Wow.
As a matter of fact, I went to an indoor boulder place with my wife just yesterday, and we bouldered around for exercise. But you're able to grab big chunks for the handholds. It's not like you're on, some wall where you got two fingers and you're trying to get yourself, So, rock climbing, a lot of, weightlifting, breaking my hands a lot, everything. So I have a lot of arthritis in my fingers, but this Dupuytren's came around, and you found out. As a matter of fact, I'm still trying to find someone in my area before I go to Richmond. You were telling me, folks, Mimi and I have become friends outside of the podcast. We send emails back and forth. And you gave me this doctor that does something different. You want to explain that?
Yeah. So I started doing research, and the internet was pretty new. And I actually found in some sort of chat room for Dupuytren's a procedure where they do low-level radiation. It's a course of two weekly treatments, and they've had an enormous amount of success with it, destroying the nodules completely, and also then stopping the Dupuytren's from continuing. Had trouble finding somebody here. Nobody would talk to me. I went to another state, North Carolina, to a cancer center. Somebody that had success with it and been doing it, oncologist, radiologist. And he happened to know somebody here in Charleston. And so created a plan, sent me here. They did the mapping. This was good 12, maybe even 14 years now. I have to go back and look. I am completely free. When I had it done, they said, maybe you get, a lot of people are getting 10 years. I have no sign of it coming. I'm so glad I had it done. The only side effect that I have still a little bit to this day is the hand where I had the radiation tends to get a little drier, so I tend to put a little bit more lotion on it. Nobody else is going to notice it. I notice it. But it destroyed it, and I have the whole use of my hand, which was important because here I am an artist. How can I create if I don't have a hand? And I'm so glad I had it done.
Yeah, I'm going to have it done, Mimi, because just to give anyone an example, like if I get on the floor to do a push-up, you have to put your hand all the way back. Yeah. And when you put your hand back and it's flat on the floor, it's effing painful.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a very painful disorder, disease. My thumb, which I'm a little skewed, you can see off compared to this one where I'm not, because it was actually the nodules were getting so bad it was pulling my thumb out of its joint.
Ooh.
And that's what eventually does when the tendons constrict. And it's really interesting. I look back at it now because, I was really proactive. And then as I got sicker and sicker, I stopped being proactive. And I still haven't figured, okay, what happened? And maybe too much piled on top of me.
Right.
But it really is important to not take what you're told as gospel, to do research. It was something that was actually done in Germany that some people were doing here. It wasn't, and still probably isn't, accepted as a mainstream treatment. Orthopedic surgeons cut.
Yeah.
And Dupuytren's radiation doesn't require cutting. So they're not too concerned about learning about that.
Yeah, it would cut their, no pun intended, in half.
It would.
But you see, it goes down to, you did with your hands what I did with my shoulder, right? I had this really bad shoulder for years. It started locking up. I ripped it to shreds, Mimi, when I was 14.
Wow.
And they did the surgery that they do back then. And I was able to, I got back on a football field the next year. I became a 400-pound bench presser. But I was told at the time when I was 14, by the time you hit 30, this shoulder will be no more, because of the archaic way that they would prepare. Every football player that I knew we looked like baseballs. Either they had one set of scars right here or on both shoulders, right? Most linebackers and stuff, by the time you get to college, and back in those days, we all looked like baseballs with our shirt off. We had the exact stitching scars on our shoulders. And everybody's like, yeah, they're telling us, so most football players stop doing anything after football, right? So they can make them last longer. But somewhere around my 35th birthday, it just started getting tighter and tighter and tighter to where I couldn't use my right arm anymore. So the atrophy, Mimi went away. Let's see if she comes back here. There she is. Let's bring her back in. Mimi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so I got to where I couldn't use my arm anymore. All the muscles atrophied in this right arm and in my back and the chest and everything. That's why the only sport I can do at that point was cycling. I was down, I was able to snow ski, and I was able to go cycling, and I was able to kind of cross-country ski, but I couldn't even move my arm out, and that became too painful. I had to stop doing that. But that's what I was down to. That's why I got so good at cycling. I had nothing else.
Yeah, wow.
And the only surgery that they would do is where they would put this piece of plastic on the cup side of your arm and then put a piece of steel. They would cut the bone out, put a piece of steel. So you have steel and plastic. The problem with that is that with the shoulder, they can only do it once. And it's guaranteed to wear out, right? It just does. Now, if you're old enough, they feel all-cause mortality. Same thing they felt with you. Right. You'll end up dying before you wear it out. And by the way, don't write to me, folks. Oh, there's a reverse shoulder that wears out too, and it's not as strong, and all the problems. Well, I started doing research around 2007 or 8, somewhere around there, to see if there was anything that could be done. And there was one guy named Frederick Mattson, he's been on this podcast, who was doing this incredible surgery up at University of Washington, UW, up in Seattle. And everyone said that the surgery couldn't be done. Some German doctor had gotten really close with cadavers, but had never really perfected it. Frederick Mattson perfected the surgery called the ream and run. And what it allowed people to do was, if you were young like me with the problem and you had a lot of road left, to your life, they would do the surgery. The biggest downside was 4 days in the hospital because there's a lot of drainage that has to go on,
Right.
and then 6 months of pain. So they said you could be on painkillers for 6 months, right? Long story short, I was on painkillers for 11 days. The bottom line is, if you do the surgery and you have this procedure done, you could go on, I could do pull-ups. I can get on that thing and just rack out 15 pull-ups for you right now. No problem.
Wow.
Right? I could go rock climbing again in the gym if I wanted to. I can go cycling. I feel like a Tampon commercial from the 1970s. I can play tennis. I can ride bikes. I can go swimming. All the things they used to say in those commercials. But it allowed me to have a life again. Now,
Right.
had I not done all of that and, really do the research. So I started researching in 2008. I got the surgery done in 2015. I'm back to normal life.
Yeah,
Right.
that's fabulous.
But you see, most people, and by the way, I went to Curlin and Job. That's where the Lakers go to get fixed when they get broken. That's where the baseball player, Curlin and Job, Dr. Job invented Tommy John surgery and decided not to name it after himself, but after the baseball player. That surgery was invented at Curlin and Job. That's where my shoulder guys, I had 2 shoulder doctors there, and they had both operated on me with scopes pulling out different pieces. And they both said, yeah, don't do the ream and run. We don't know. They said that because they don't do it there.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Just because they're the best doesn't mean
Right.
you got to stop with there. You just got to keep looking.
Yeah, and look, I was in there once getting a surgery, and when I woke up in the post-op, I'm next to Shaquille O'Neal. This is where Shaquille O'Neal goes, one of the wealthiest athletes in the world, right? But they didn't have the answer, so I had to go find the answer. And if you're not lazy, folks, if you're like Mimi and you're like me and you're not a lazy person, you can go and find the right thing and do the right thing. I want to get into Mimi's real problem and how she fixed that. But before we do that, I need to tell you guys about Villa Capelli olive oil. Villa Capelli olive oil is the longest running sponsor of this show. I just drank an ounce of it before we started recording today. I'm such an Italian. I had an ounce of Villa Capelli, and then I made a quadruple espresso that I finished while me and Mimi were talking before the show. Why would I drink an ounce of olive oil? Well, I'm not using it anywhere else today on salads or anything else. I want olive oil in my body every day. It's a healthy supplement that you should have, just like taking fish oil. And Villa Capelli is 100% pure olive oil, and you can taste it. You can smell it. You know what it is. You want to save 10%? When you get to checkout at villacapelli.com, put in promo code Vinny, VINNIE. If you spend more than $125 after the discount, meaning spend $140 minus 14, you're still at $126, you'll get free shipping. So 2 ways to save at Villa Capelli. Let them know we sent you. We're talking to Mimi. I always want to call you your other name, Mimi Morgan. And did you get that name from grandkids? How did you get Mimi?
Yeah, for my grandkids, and it's just stuck. And I have to tell you a funny story. I work part-time at the senior center, and I was walking down the hall, and someone said, hey, Mimi, how are you? I was like, oh, my God, he must have asked me what my name was, and I said Mimi. So my birth name is Kim, but Mimi's what everybody calls me at Twitter, and half the people in my life call me Mimi. So I think that's winning out.
Yeah, I think I outed you on the show one time, the first time you were on, and I was like, I didn't know,
Yeah, no, that's okay. You're not the only one.
Yeah, I have to keep looking around and call her Mimi.
Yeah. So, and then people that know me say, oh, can I keep calling you Mimi? I don't want to call you Kim.
I had a friend in New Orleans. Her name was Mimi, and loved her to death. She's still around. I just don't see her much anymore. At any rate, Parkinson's, near and dear to my heart. A girl I loved very much. The only other woman I had a long-term relationship with, a little older than you. She would have probably been 72 now. She was about 10 years older than me. So I'm about to turn 63. And even after we broke up, we remained friends. We were together for a long time, maybe 10 years. And she called me one day and she said, I have Parkinson's. And it blew me away. And by the way, I met this woman back in New Orleans. She was like an aerobic dance queen. She was always healthy and fit, always ate correctly, did everything right? But Parkinson's got her. And eventually she died. She died about 2 years ago.
Wow.
You have exactly, you're close to her. You're within 3 years of her, right?
Right. Right.
You know, and by the way, I watched the decline because whenever we wouldn't just talk on the phone whenever we would talk anymore, we would talk with the FaceTime. And it got to where I would say, Marilyn, you need to put the face down. You need to put the phone down because I'm getting nauseous. I can't, her hands were so shaky. So she would have to prop the phone up. Right. And she couldn't even stay in the camera. I mean, she had it really bad. And it broke my heart to watch it.
It's tough to watch.
Yeah, it really is. But she never wanted to change her diet because she said her doctor says it won't mean anything, so she kept eating grains, heart healthy. She was one of those people, heart healthy grains. She ate some meat and some fish, but most of her diet, bagel in the morning, that kind of thing. Who knows? I can't sit here. I know her son listens to the show. I can't sit here and say she would still be here today, but I can't help but think that I didn't do my best. It really hurts. It disturbs me in ways you couldn't imagine. Yeah,
no, I can't imagine. I lived through it, and they do tell you diet's not going to matter. I remember asking that question, and the only diet that's going to matter is if you want your medication to work, which the medication doesn't treat you, it masks your symptoms. And there are uncomfortable symptoms, and certainly symptoms that you don't want people to notice. If you want your medications to work, you need to limit your protein and have it at the end of the day when you're home and nobody's going to see you. Because it's not going to work right. It competes with protein in the gut. And that's what I did. And I'm just getting sicker and sicker. And then along with the nauseous from the medication, which I really wrestled with. I also was on an enormous amount by the time, a little over 2 years, I had to give up work. And, I'm at 1,200 milligrams. 2.5 years into diagnosis, which is an enormous amount. I was a candidate suspect for one of the more advanced forms. And I'm taking my pills every 3.5, 4 hours. And then 2 pills right before bedtime try to get me through the night. I had dystonia, which is where your limbs seize up in the middle of the night, parasinomia, a couple other disturbances, restless leg severe, a number of things that would affect me in the night. And it was pretty tough. My speech was affected. I mean, wasn't a part of me that wasn't affected. But shortly after that, exercise is important. I was exercising, then stopped a little bit. It was really difficult, but actually, I walked 2 miles one day and my earbuds dropped. One of them did. I had to go back and I walked 4 miles, and I was pretty enthusiastic. I had a little second wind. I just did 4 miles. Maybe I can beat this. Went about my chores for the day, went and it was in February, sat on a bench to enjoy it. Had lentil meatballs in the oven because I'm still doing the whole vegetarian thing. Went to go sit and enjoy the fresh air, pretty day in February, and I had a stroke. Oh. It was a medium-sized stroke. Came through the stroke pretty good, but unfortunately the IV was infected with staph. Eventually it was Dean MRSA. Spread to my spine, And, was in the hospital for a couple months. And, now the RA and the Parkinson's is a walk in the park to really what I'm facing.
Right.
Now there's, I've got a 50-50 chance. And even Dr. Baker, because I did a podcast with him, and he's orthopedic, said, well, you probably had less considering all that you had.
Yeah.
Of even surviving the next year and a half, because it had allowed to seed was in my spinal canal muscles and in my vertebrae, causing, severe damage. And they're like, chances of you even living the next year and a half is not good. And so, I'm just wasting away, getting sicker and sicker.
What year was this, Mimi? How long ago? Because when you look at you now, it's hard to...
5 years this February was when I had the stroke, and it was April when I came out of the hospital for the infection. So it's just a little over 5 years ago, which is remarkable for somebody at my age where I am now.
Yeah. Because you don't look your age. Do we say your age on the air? Do you talk?
We did. I said I'm going to be 70 in 3
weeks. Okay,
weeks.
I didn't know if we said that on the air, off the air. So, what was the aha moment or the fuck it moment, if you will, where you just went, I'm not going to do this anymore? So
it was about a year and a half. So we're talking 3.5 years ago was that moment, because I'm still listening to the doctors. I'm using an aid to move, and now I can barely walk a couple blocks, occasionally a quarter mile, but then that set me back. I'm sitting to wash my hair, sitting to cook. I'm basically immobile. And my family's already, chit-chatting about, we're going to have to seriously consider about putting you in a home in a couple years. And the first thought in my head was, I'm not going to make it till then.
Right.
I mean, I knew I was going, but I have my mailbox story, and I know you have one too. I could barely get past this mailbox, go turn around in absolute defeat, and I was presented with a question. So, okay, you can't do this. What can you do? And it was my 10-step moment. I was like, I have 10 steps in me. And, I was an athlete, nationally ranked equestrian. I'm pretty active, did a lot of venture sports. So, 10 steps is, talk about that's just crushing for somebody who, biked 300 miles in Ireland with their own gear, and now 10 steps was the most I had in me. But I took those 10 steps, and shortly after, at this point now I put on weight because I'm not moving and I'm still leading my high carb, vegetarian diet with barely any kind of protein. I go see somebody and he recommended 50% fat, 25 protein, and 25 carb. And I thought he was crazy, but I listened to him.
Who was this? Can we give him some credit here?
I don't remember his name. He actually was a chiropractor who'd been sick, and he's at a clinic across the street, and I don't know. But really, I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't, landed with him. I mean, he had to talk me off the cliff a lot because, my first thing was, are you crazy when I'm going to gain weight? And you realize my medication's not going to work now. And I can't afford it not to work. I can't afford to deal with all the symptoms that I have. And, he asked me to trust him, and I did. And the aha moment came. So I started to not feel worse, and I had been feeling worse. And then I started to feel better a few months later. The aha moment came 6 to 9 months when my neuro symptoms were improving. I found instead of taking my, literally, I didn't even, at this point, I could tell when my body needed the medication before my alarm went off that I had. Every 3.5 hours, I'm taking 2 pills. I've got them lined up so that I can function. And now all of a sudden, I find myself not needing the medication. And that's when the light bulb went off. And that's where I realized, oh, my God, what I am eating is healing me. And I literally, I've been poisoned. I've been poisoned with all the medication. I've been poisoned with the food. and I couldn't necessarily see where I was going, but I knew I was on the right path, and I didn't know that how healthy I would end up or how well I would get, but I knew how to keep going with it. And at this point now, I am down to probably 5% carbs. When the neuro symptoms got better, I've upped my protein. I'm now walking more, and I'm getting my fat up to 70%. And that's when I started to notice the real improvement in my symptoms, particularly the Parkinson's. Pretty soon on, and I was clean keto for the first, clean keto period, but it wasn't until I got the fat up, until I started eating the whole hamburger, the whole steak, the fat on the steak.
Right.
That and then doing it day after day after day, at least 5 days a week. And I really started to crave it. Did I really start to get better?
When I tell people all the time, as a matter of fact, the woman that's going to be on the show next week, Megan Hawks, she, I've been working with her for a long time, and she's lost well over 100 pounds.
Wow.
And at one point she said to me, because she's become an athlete, I think her story is going to be incredible for people to hear. I'm using this Friday show right now to talk to more people like you versus the experts, because now every doctor's an expert saying the same thing. So,
yeah,
I'd rather have you guys on because it's way more inspirational. But at one time, and I'm going to have her tell the story. Folks, you got to listen next week. We haven't done the show yet. But she at one time said to me, Vinny, I'm going to go a little lower fat, and I'm going to go a little higher protein. I'm going to up the protein a bunch and knock the fat down. And I said, why are you going to do that? Well, everybody online is talking about this, that, and the other thing. And instead of me going, F you, I've been helping you for a couple of years, I said, you know what? Do that. I want you to go and do it. But don't be afraid to go back to high fat. Well, she was 30 pounds worth of weight gain into her new foray, and then decided, oh, wait, I need to go back to eating high fat. And not only, I might be saying this wrong, I might be doing the wrong numbers. Either she gained 20 and lost 30, or she gained 30 and lost 40. But she ended up going back to higher fat and losing more weight and feeling better. And when you try to explain that to people, someone like you you were worried about getting fat.
Right.
And I've seen photos of you. You don't look like a fat woman to me at all.
No. And I tried the higher protein because everybody's talking about it after, a couple of years of getting well. I'm like, no, I need to go back to the fat because that's really what does it for me.
Yeah.
And I feel my best that way. So.
Yeah. And, it's an amazing thing. So there's something that just popped into my mind with you, Mimi, and I don't think we've ever talked about this before. But you're doing better. You're not taking all of your medication. But there's a doctor involved still. When you go see this doctor, what does he or she have to say about the situation? Are you telling
me? My chiropractor that I'm seeing every week?
No, I'm talking about your doctor who's prescribing pills.
Well, actually, the Parkinson's, which is a movement disorder specialist, it's a more advanced form of neurologist. I told her what I was doing. And she wrote a note. Actually, I happened to be looking at my old records, and she wrote in there that I'm starting to do more keto and actually improving. And she actually was a good doctor and didn't tell me not to. And probably because we're given a lot of leeway with our symptoms and our medication. And nobody else wanted to hear it. And I probably had 10 doctors. I had everybody but a kidney specialist for all of my illnesses. And nobody wanted to hear it. Eventually, a year and a half into this process, I started to eliminate my medication as I started getting better. The gastros are like, no, you got to take your omeprazole twice a day. And it's like, well, I don't need it. Well, you got to take it. And I just started ignoring them. And I'm not recommending somebody else did, but I chose to do it that way. I really, at this point, I'm trusting my body. I'm trusting this man that I'm working with. I'm feeling better. I'm finding hope. So I'm just eliminating my medications. I am now off 2 years this past June of 13 plus medications at over 65,000 a year.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And by the way, folks, I want to reiterate what Mimi just said. I don't recommend anyone going off of medication without talking to your doctor and being titrated off, because some medications you have to literally titrate. Now, Mimi went rogue and took a chance, and it seems like you were titrating off on your own.
I was. Some of them I took a long time. My last two was my Parkinson's, and then they wanted me on antibiotics for life. It was a risk. I was talked to the doctors, absolutely did not want me to do it. They said the MRSA is going to come back. I was willing to take that risk, and it paid off, because now I'm off of antibiotics. I knew I was well enough, and I knew that was going to come back. Being on antibiotics for that long, was going to eventually come back and kill me down the road. But I took a long time, and really what it came to is, well, if I'm not having symptoms, why do I need to take medications? You know, I had symptoms. I'm given the medications for them. I don't have symptoms. Why do I need the medications?
I feel the same way, and I've told pieces and parts of this story. You know, my mailbox story, the first time I had cancer, I was getting ready. For anyone who's out there, I was an ultra cyclist, if you're new to this podcast, and they took me off of a bike one day to tell me that you're dying. Right. I was in the middle of a 300-mile ride. I was about 200 miles deep into that ride, and I was still crusted with salt in my cycling outfit when I learned that I had leukemia back in 2007. And pretty immediately, I was put on heavy doses of chemotherapy. And within a couple of weeks, a guy who was able to ride a bike into oblivion, I had trouble walking. So I was staying at a friend's house, and my bedroom was upstairs. When I came downstairs, walking downstairs, sometimes I would have to stop midway and sit down on the stairs and get my composure. Walking upstairs was like going to, I was on the top of Mount Everest trying to get to the peak. I might have to stop twice on the way up and just sit for a minute and then drag my ass up. That's why I didn't go up and down stairs. But one day I was longing to go outside. I was supposed to be in the hospital, but the Cedars-Sinai released me to my friend who was a cancer specialist. She was a radiation oncologist, and she could probably do my Dupuytren's if she was still working. And at any rate, because she had a linear accelerator. I was in Bel Air, of all places. That's where she lived, which means she was a pretty famous doctor. And I looked outside, and I looked at her mailbox, and I so wanted to go outside. And I said, okay, I'm going to walk to that mailbox and back. And it wasn't that many steps. Mimi said 10 steps. Maybe I had that, maybe double that. But I remember walking outside and said, as God is my witness, if I die, I don't care. I'm going to tap that mailbox. And I tapped it. And then I sat down. I needed a break to get back. Right? That's where I was with cancer. Now, this time around, they told me it would come back in 5 years, Mimi. I made it 17. Everyone's heard the story. Right? 17 years, I finally go in. Now I'm in Virginia, so I'm dealing with UVA, and I have a brand new doctor who, by the way, I love. He's a great doctor. But when I went in and he looked at my records, he said, wow, 17 years. And I was like, yeah. He goes, I said, you ever know anyone? He goes, no one goes 17 years. He goes, must be good genetics. And I looked at him and said, Doc, if I had good genetics, I wouldn't be in here right now. There's something wrong with my gene pool. We got to agree on that. And he kind of laughed it off, and he was, oh, yeah. And I said, I I really do believe my diet had something to do with it. He goes, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we're going to be putting you on chemo in a couple of days. So there was no interest in really, what did you eat? What did you do? Because they're not going to study. You know, I'm one person. I'm N equals 1, right?
Yeah.
I'm not an epidemiological study. I'm not in a clinic. You don't really know what I have for 17 years. And he's got other people to meet with. He ain't interested in what I had to eat, right?
Right.
Okay. And by the way, every nurse that put the infusion in me every day, they would see the chart and they would go, wow, 17 years. Oh, one of them was, she goes, how are you feeling today? I said, feel great. And I said, yeah, I was on my spinner this morning before I got here for an hour. And she said, all right, there you go. All right. Hey, wait, you're not kidding. No, I was on my spinner before I got here. You weren't sick? No. How did you sleep last night? Like a baby? You know, the next day, how are you feeling today? Great. I was on my rowing machine for an hour this morning. Yeah, okay. All right. No, I was it was a different nurse every day, right? Because they switch in and out. They thought I was making up the fact that I was getting loaded up on chemo, yet I had the energy to work out every day. The last time I couldn't walk to a freaking mailbox.
Yeah.
This time
You're
around.
Like 17 years younger.
Yeah, I was 17 years younger, and I was an ultra athlete at the time. They can't even begin to, they think I'm joking about treadmills and rowing machines.
Yeah.
Right? But that's what I was doing. And by the way, they put me on antibiotics and antivirals. And I said, what's this for? They said, just so you don't get sick. I started getting hives. They pulled me off. Right? I got them to pull me off. I said, won't you stop this? Please just stop this madness. They told me I was going to be on those drugs for 6 months. I took them for like 4 or 5 days. Turns out I didn't need them at all.
Right.
Right. So that's the point, folks. Listen to Mimi. She advocated for herself when she had Dupuytren's. She advocated for herself eventually. She gave up for a while. She would have been dead by now. I'm convinced of that. But she started advocating for herself, and she's better. I had to advocate for myself recently when I went in and say, look, I don't need these antivirals, and because they gave me something to counteract that. They go, oh, wait, hang on, we're going to give you a steroid now. So they gave me, what's the one they give everyone? Prednisone.
Right, prednisone, yeah.
And now I'm bouncing off the walls. I can't sleep at night, right? So they were getting ready to give me a sleeping pill. It's like, do you realize you're stacking drugs to try to get me to take something I don't need to begin with? Does any of this sound crazy to anyone? And that's when the doctor agreed, well, let's take you off and see how you do.
Yeah.
They took me off of everything except, of course, the chemo, which saved my life again, or hopefully it saved my life. It's crazy how you have to advocate for yourself. Yes?
Well, you do though. I mean, it really is our responsibility, and it's absolutely imperative that we do. And that, doctors have a place, and that doesn't mean that they don't have wisdom and they might know best, but, ultimately we have to make our own decision, and we have to research, my staph infection, bacteremia, sepsis, eventually deemed MRSA because the antibiotics weren't working. The reason I got to that point, and the reason why it was allowed to spread and seed so long is when I was originally treated, they followed the, I can't think of the name, it just slipped my mind. They followed the protocol that the infectious disease puts out. If you have this in your blood, this is the antibiotic. If that doesn't work, we do this. Well, the antibiotic wasn't working. Finally, really sick after 5 days. They put me on a new antibiotic. Additionally, I started to get better. When they sent me home with a PICC line, they took me off of the second antibiotic and sent me home with the one that wasn't working because that's the protocol. And so we need to, I wasn't aware, my family wasn't aware, but we need to be aware. We need to ask those questions. We need to be able to make those decisions because they have guidelines that they follow, and they're not going to veer from them.
Yeah.
And that can ultimately result in our death. And for me, it made a situation worse because I went home with a PICC line with an antibiotic that didn't work in the beginning. And guess what? Now the infection is spread through my body, into my bones, into my spinal canal, from my blood, because they followed the protocol, because they didn't want to get into trouble for not following the protocol.
Right.
So we really have to be that aware to really know all of these things. And, it's hard when you're sick, but choose somebody in your family who you trust, who you know is going to be a pit bull, literally, and fighting for you.
Yeah, doctors just don't look, and I feel bad for doctors. They can't practice medicine anymore. They're told.
No, they can't. They absolutely can't.
Yeah, they're told do A, B, C, and D, and if you do that, when you get sued, we got your back, right?
Well, that's right. So they're caught in a hard place too, because so it's tough.
Yeah, I feel for the people. Go, you hate doctors? Like, no, I feel bad for doctors.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish we had more time. I would tell you a story about my mother and the 2 surgeries they wanted her to have, and I stepped in, and as it turns out, she didn't need either surgery.
Yeah.
Right, and everyone's heard the story on the podcast before, but if I hadn't, and all of my brothers stepped in. One of my brothers is good friends with a doctor that lives down there in Louisiana. They had him call me and say, look, you have your mother's ear. You got to get her to, this doctor who I had a drink with him 6 months ago at a wedding. He's a great guy. He said, Vinny, you need to come off of this. Your mother needs these 2 surgeries. And his name is Mark. And I said, Mark, she doesn't. She doesn't. They were both orthopedic surgeries. She had one fall. She broke her left kneecap and her right shoulder. I don't know how in the hell she did that in one fall, but she did.
Yeah.
And I said, I looked at the x-rays. He goes, but you're not a doctor and you're not an expert. I said, no, but I've broken enough bones and I've learned how to read x-rays. And I sent the x-rays to my guy up in Seattle, and he's telling me absolutely not, even though she has a Mercedes crack on her. They call it because it looks like the Mercedes peace symbol on her shoulder. It's on the outside, and she didn't hurt the meniscus. They were going to go in and put a fake shoulder in my mother, and she didn't need it.
Yeah.
And the knee thing, I asked the doctor, I said, it's a hairline fracture across the patella. What are you going to do? He goes, we're going to put a screw in it, and we're going to put a plate. I said, but if you just casted it up the way they used to just cast people, wouldn't that just fix it? He goes, yeah, you could do that. I said, okay, put a cast on her. I had to tell a effing doctor what to do, which drives me nuts. But no one else is going to ask. Everyone else is going to go. Because you notice the first, when my brothers called me, he said, doctor said her shoulder was crushed. I said, okay, crushed is not a medical term. That word is what made me call down there and request the x-rays. No, Vin, you understand. They said she crushed it. Okay. Was that the words from the doctor? That's how the doctor explained it to us. Okay, I need to talk to that doctor because that is not medical terminology.
No, it isn't.
And when I finally got it out of him, I said, Doc, before I saw the x-rays, I said, what does crushed mean? She goes, well, she's got a Mercedes crack. I went, so she's got the peace symbol. He goes, that's right. And I said, what's going on with her meniscus? Did she screw up the labrum? No, she did not. And that's when he goes, are you a doctor? I said, no, but I've had every shoulder surgery you can have. I know what's going on here. And he got hoity-toity with me, but I ended up winning on both counts. And my mother had 0 surgeries, and they said, Vinny, she'll never be able to, if she doesn't do the surgery, she'll never be able to lift her right. She can lift her right arm straight up now. Right? So was I wrong about any of it?
No.
No. I hate, it drives me nuts, folks. What you want to get from this is just like Mimi, just like me with my mother, someone needs to step in on your behalf, or you may have to step in on someone else's behalf, but you have to advocate for yourself. That's the message here today. Right, Mimi?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where can people find you?
So I'm on Twitter every day, and it's at Mimi K. Morgan. You can also find me on Instagram, and that's Mimi Morgan, initial K.
Yeah, because I was following you on Instagram, and one time you were trying to get me to buy like a Rolls Royce or something.
Oh,
I realized,
I got hacked.
Yeah, right now I'm hacked on Facebook.
I hope you didn't buy one. Somebody else came close to buying a house. I've got a couple of friends, some that have podcasts too, and clicked the thing thinking I had a new clothing line.
Yeah, I'm right now.
Workout line. Oh my God! And they got hacked too. And of course, I can't get in. So the hackers are out, but Instagram can't get me back in. So I'm back at square one, starting over. So it's Mimi Morgan K for Instagram and Mimi K Morgan for Twitter. I'm at Twitter every day. That's really where my home is.
It's interesting because right now one of my accounts is hacked on the other Meta, on Facebook, and people are going, I think you're being hacked. And it's like, you know what? I'm done with Facebook. They can hack me all they want. But the bottom line is no, I couldn't buy a Rolls Royce, Mimi, because I'm a podcaster and I do documentaries. I don't have Rolls Royce money. So, nor do I think I will.
I don't either. I don't even have a podcast. So
yeah. So there, folks, you know where to find Mimi. You know what to do with us. I have a movie out there right now on Amazon. Don't just watch the movie. Go and check out Dirty Keto. Mimi was talking about doing clean keto the right way. Go check out Dirty Keto. And once you watch it, rate it and review it. That's how we get other people to find the movie. And but rate and review this podcast. Do a lot of rating and reviewing when it comes to me and both me and Mimi. On behalf of Mimi, I almost said Kim again, but I guess I can say Kim. Mimi Morgan. My name is Vinny Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with a little more of the Commodores.
36, 24, 36. What a winning hand. Oh, she's a big house. She's mighty. I'm just letting it all hang out. And she's a bread.
Thank you for listening to Fitness Confidential. Get more information at VinnyTortorich.com. Remember to rate and review us on iTunes. And follow Vinny on Instagram and Twitter.